this and that, these and those. If you want to use these 4 words correctly, you need to do 2 things. You need to pronounce them correctly, and second, you need to know the rules for using them in real life. Thank you so much for listening to Master English with Tim, the podcast where every Monday I teach you English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying, so you can move your English from intermediate to advanced. Okay, now let's look at this, that, these, and those. The first problem that people have with these words is that for some people, these words are hard to pronounce. If you can't say the word correctly, well then that's a very big problem. And all 4 of these words start with the sound th. Th is the same sound that we have in words like whether, other, rather, and of course, the. And of course we spell this th. And for many people who are learning English, the sound th is where the problems start with these words. It's hard to say th, so instead people say z, like in zebra. But people will understand you more easily if you say the, this and that, these and those. If you want to use these 4 words correctly, you need to do 2 things. You need to pronounce them right, and you need to know the rules for using them in real life. Thanks for listening to Master English with Tim, the podcast where every Monday I teach you English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying, so you can move your English from intermediate to advanced. Okay, let's look at this, that, these, and those. The first problem people have with these words is that they are hard to pronounce. All 4 of these words start with the sound th. Th is the same sound that we have in words like whether, other, rather, and of course, the. And of course, we spell th with a th. And for many people learning English, the sound th is where the problems start with these 4 words. It's hard to say th, so people instead say z, like in zebra. But people will understand you better if you say this sound correctly, so let's analyze how to say it the right way. You can say th by doing a couple things. First, you need to put the end of your tongue a bit outside of your mouth. So normally, of course, your tongue is inside of your mouth, but now you need to push your tongue outside of your mouth. Now, how exactly do you position your tongue outside of your mouth when you make the th sound? Well, you have top teeth and you have bottom teeth. You need to take your tongue and push it against the bottom of your top teeth. And when your tongue is in that position, on the bottom of your top teeth, you push air out between your tongue and your top front teeth. Try it now, with your tongue in that position. Th. If this sound is still difficult for you to say, I suggest that you go to YouTube and watch some videos on how to make it. For example, Rachel's English has a great explanation on this. The sound th is in all 4 of today's words, like I said, so you really need to know it well for this lesson to work for you. Okay, now let's start by talking about specific words. Let's start with the word this, T-H-I-S. The word this has 3 sounds. First, we have the th sound at the beginning of the episode, which we already talked about earlier. The second sound in this is I, the same sound that you hear in the word fish. And to make this sound, you need to move your lips like a goldfish. You open them just a bit, just a couple of millimeters, and you do it quickly. I, this. The third and last sound of this is very easy. It's just s, which is spelled with an S and is very easy for most people to pronounce. So now that you have all 3 sounds, just say this. This kid, this car, this pencil, this notebook, this banana. Maybe you even want to pause or stop the recording for a second so you can say those things. Okay, now let's move to that. We spell that T-H-A-T. You already practiced the first sound of that. The first sound, of course, is the, so we can now move on to the second sound. The second sound is ah, like in bad, cat, or after. To make this sound, you need to open your mouth wide. You need to really open it. It probably will feel unusual or comfortable when you do this. While your mouth is open wide, you need to pull your cheeks back a little bit, and your tongue should be low in your mouth. So mouth wide open, cheeks pulled back and your tongue low in your mouth. Try it now. Ah. Now say that. That apple. That man. That cat. That backpack. Okay, now what is the difference between this and that? Do we use this and that to talk about one thing or about many things? We use this and that to talk actually about one thing. Listen to the examples from earlier. This kid, this car, this pencil, this notebook, this banana. That apple, that man, that cat, that backpack. So the difference between this and that is that we use this to talk about something that is close to us. How close? Well, the answer in most situations is in fact very specific. We use this if an object is close enough that you can reach out and touch it. For example, right now I am sitting in a chair, and there are several things that are so close to me that I can touch them. So I can say this telephone, this computer, this chair, the one that I'm sitting in right now, this computer charger, this book. Now it's your turn. Where are you now, and what things are so close to you that you can touch them? You can stop the recording now and say the word this with many things that are close to you. Just remember, you can only say this if the thing is one, not many. Okay, now let's talk about that, T-H-A-T, that. Remember that is also used for talking about one thing. But we use that to talk about something that is farther away. It could be just a couple of meters from us, but if it's singular and we can't touch it, then we use that. Right now, I am looking around the room that I am recording this episode in, and I see that lamp, that cup full of pens, that printer, that clock on the wall. Now, if I stand up, I can look out the window and onto the street. I see that car, that white house, that tree in front of my house, that mountain of brown leaves next to the street. And what about you? What singular things do you see that are far enough away from you that you cannot touch them? Okay, up until now in this episode, you have heard me use the words this and that as adjectives. Remember that adjectives are words that we use to describe something, like blue car, long day, hot drink, and so on. Blue, long, and hot are all adjectives. And when we say this bike and that cat, the words this and that are also adjectives. But we can also use this and that as pronouns. A pronoun is a word that we use instead of a noun. For example, we can say he instead of Tim, she instead of Michelle, it instead of car. In those examples, the words he and she are pronouns for talking about people, and it is a pronoun for talking about a thing. But we can also use this and that to talk about things. In other words, we can use this and that without nouns. For instance, if you are in a restaurant and have a bowl of soup in front of you, you don't need to say, this soup is really good. You can simply say, this is really good. And the word this, it's clear from context that the word this refers to the soup. You don't need to say this soup. Or if you see the waiter in the restaurant walking past with a really delicious looking dessert, you can say, wow, that looks delicious. Okay, congratulations. You are now halfway done with today's 4 words. In this episode, we have already talked about singular words. Now let's talk about plural ones, words where you talk about 2 or more things. We have 2 plural pronouns or adjectives, these and those. Let's start with these. These has 3 sounds. The first is the th sound that we talked about earlier. Then we have the long e sound, the same sound that you have in words like cheese, need, ear, and leave. Most people say this sound without difficulty, so let's move to the last sound, which is z. Z is not hard for most people to say, but when the sound z is at the end of a word, people often don't say z. Instead, they say s. This happens a lot with people who speak some really common European languages. For example, Portuguese speakers, Spanish speakers, German speakers, Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian speakers. So those languages are all languages where the z sound is never found at the end of a word. So when you pronounce these, be sure to do two things. You need to make the e sound long and you need to say z instead of s at the end of the word. Okay, now let's talk about how to use this word. We use these to talk about two or more things that are so close to us that we can touch them. So when I look around me in the room where I'm recording, I can see these credit cards, these papers, and these batteries. These things are all very close to me. I can touch them right now. Now it's your turn again. Can you say anything that's close to you that you have more than one of? Okay, now we have our final word, those. We have the at the beginning, then o like in go, know or grow, and then finally z. Just remember again to say z at the end and not s. I think you were able to guess that we use those to talk about more than one thing that is far enough away from us that we cannot touch it. When I look around the room, I see those books, those pens in that cup that I talked about earlier, and also those pencils, and those shelves full of books. All of those things are far enough away that I cannot touch them. We can also use these and those as pronouns without nouns. Okay, now we have talked about all four words. Now let's review. We use this to talk about one thing that is close. We use these to talk about two or more things that are close. We use that to talk about one thing that is far, and we use those to talk about two or more things that are far. So, is this everything? Well, actually, no. We need to add 3 details to the basic picture I've already given you. The first detail is a pretty simple one. I said earlier that we use this and these to talk about things that are so close that you can reach out and touch them. Well, if we're talking about much larger things, for example, a tree or building, we can say this or these even when they're a bit farther away. In the case of trees or buildings or anything else that is large, we can say this or these when something is a little bit farther away. Exactly how far? Well, I would say about 5 or 6 meters. It's also true that there is not a clear, exact line between where we would say this and these on one hand and that and those on the other. Okay, to understand the second detail, imagine that you are traveling by bus and another passenger sits down next to you, takes out a book, and starts reading. In this case, you are close enough to the other person that you could easily reach out and take the book from them. But if you want to ask the person next to you if they like the book that they're reading, it's best to say, "Do you like that book you're reading?" Why that? Well, remember that we use that to talk about things that are far away. And even though the book in this case is not far away, the word that makes clear that the book is not yours, but instead belongs to the other person. Now, if your neighbor pulls out some candies, which you have never seen before, and starts eating the candies, you might ask them, "What are those candies you're eating?" Again, the word those is for things that are far away, and here, those makes it clear that the candies are your neighbor's and not yours. Now, the final detail is about talking about things that are abstract. So far in this episode, all the examples you have heard are about physical things or materials or people. These are all things that you can reach out and touch. But what if we are talking about abstract things like idea, problem, case, or explanation? In that case, you can use either this and these when you want to make clear that something is yours, and that or those if you want to say that something is not yours or is not connected with you. For example, if someone you know starts complaining and saying that their life is hard and then asks you for money to help them, you probably will say, "Those are your problems." In a more positive situation, maybe your colleague, Yvonne, had a really great idea. Your boss thinks that the idea was yours, though, and tells you what a great idea it is. But you stop your boss and say, "But wait, that was Yvonne's idea." Or another situation, imagine that you are in charge of a project at work, and one of your colleagues makes so many suggestions about how to complete the project that you start to get angry. You tell the person, "Hey, this is my project," or "These are my ideas." Okay, that is all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening.